Greetings viewers, welcome back to the channel and welcome to Mooloolah. A little bit of Mooloolah magic. It's just turned 7 a.m. Another outstanding Sunday morning on the Sunshine Coast, southeast Queensland, Australia. Let's go for a walk and talk on CoffeeChillTV. Come along with me on CoffeeChillTV. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe if you're feeling the vibe. And folks, I should reveal that in addition to pointing out some of the the lovely scenery that one will see at the Mooloolah Wharf, the Mooloolah Spit, in and around Mooloolah Beach. I mean, this is a very special part of the world. In addition to showing you some of the local visuals, I want to get into some talking points on expat life. And there's a beautiful soothing breeze coming over my right shoulder. There may be some wind effects. Apologies if there is. All of my narration is live to tape, folks, on CoffeeChillTV. No overdubbing, no auto dubbing. We don't do any of that stuff. And so today's topic, expat life. Part-time versus full-time. You know, there are a lot of expats out there. Many of them are all in. Full-time expats. Many of them half and half, a foot in two camps, part-time. Let's unpack those concepts and talk about the pros and cons and strategies and just, some random thoughts from yours truly on expat life, full-time versus part-time. So folks, before I jump too far into the topic, if you're new to the channel, you might be curious about my credentials in discussing this topic. Well, they are solid because I've had many reincarnations and stops and starts, and I've been all types. I've been up and down the dial of part-time and full-time expat life, going back to the early 90s where, I was part-time expat. I did 2 6-month stints in London, working expat life, and the other 2 6-month stints, I was out of Australia for 2 years. So a year's worth of work and a year's worth of travel, backpacking. Fast forward to the late 2010s and, Thailand. Initially, I was a full-time retired expat. Then I came out of retirement, became a full-time working expat. Spent 4 years straight in Thailand before I had to come back to Australia for some family matters. And fast forward to today, where at the moment I'm kind of a half and half expat. I'm biding my time. I've got a foot in two camps. I'm spending sort of, 6-7 months a year in the land of wonder, the land down under, and I'm spending 5 to 6 months a year in the land of smiles, Thailand, and I'm sort of bookending those trips. And I'll talk about logistics of part-time expat life soon, but I'm bookending those trips with little holidays in and around Australasia and Southeast Asia. But right now I am a part-time expat, but I've been a full-time expat, and I think I'm in a pretty good position to talk to you about what it's like up and down that spectrum, the continuum of part-time and full-time expat life. So let's get into it. So who are the part-time expats? Who are they? I've mentioned myself, but, historically, you'll hear words like sunseeker, snowbird, people who go on sabbaticals, try before you buy, long service leave, workcations, these people. For me, yeah, I did the stereotypical thing that you did in the early 90s as an Aussie. You went to London and you worked in a bar. But at the time, I met some other backpackers, and they were going to places like Canada, Europe, America for the snow season to work. Okay, so they would go and work in the snow overseas for part of the year. So part-time expat life, it's been around for a while, and it's come back onto the radar. Well, certainly has in Thailand. Let me explain further. As the wind picks up, excuse any background noise. But yeah, look, several years ago in Thailand, there was, all kinds of announcements and stress and all kinds of material online. I didn't contribute to the discussion, but I was an interested observer about the fact that, this idea that if you spend more than 180 days in Thailand in a calendar year, maybe you got to pay some extra tax, maybe you got to have a tax identification number, a TIN number, all this sort of stuff. I'm not going to get down the weeds on that. You can Google it up yourself. Suffice to say, a lot of people I know, they sort of got the whiteboard out and went, okay, how can I spend only 179 days a year in Thailand? These were full-time expats, but they were going back down the dial to part-time because they were concerned, rightly or wrongly, if they spent more than 180 days in the kingdom, they could be up for additional tax. And for a lot of them, it wasn't about how much tax they'd pay. It was about the principle. And for a lot of folks, I think it was a wake-up call. It was like, you know what? Plans are subject to change. One of the disadvantages of being a full-time expat and, fully committed, you sold the house, the car, you fostered the dog, okay, you've gone all in. You don't hold any significant assets in your homeland. Malaysia's your new homeland, Thailand, the Philippines, Laos, Cambodia. You've gone all in. Something goes wrong. It could be a legislative change. It could be your health. Something could happen in your situation and you think, oh, I've got to go back. Got to go back to Australia. But I've got nothing in Australia. I've got a small bank account. That's it. Additionally, I'd like to, there's a tale of two countries. So I've been spending most of my time in terms of expat life, the last 6-7 years, in a place called Udon Thani, northeastern Thailand. And you've got some real rusted on expats there. The majority of the expats, in my observation, are retirees. A lot of them have got wives, kids, businesses, farms, houses. They're all in Team Thailand. I compare that to Bali. Yes, there's a lot of folks similar to that in Bali, but in Bali, Indonesia, there are a lot of Aussies. They have a foot in both camps. They haven't sold the house or the unit back in Australia. They spend, maybe 6 months a year in Bali, and 6 months back in Australia. So the part-time expat life, that's been popular in Bali for a long time. And I think with those tax proposals, I don't know where that tax law is at. Get specialist advice. Don't get that advice from me or some dodgy 25-year-old expat wet behind the ears who's not even an expat giving you taxation and expat life retiree advice. Don't go there, guys. It's come to the fore in Thailand because of these discussions around potential tax. A lot of guys are going, maybe I should go part-time. Maybe I should, do that. And there are benefits beyond, the health and financial. Another key benefit in being a part-time expat, you escape the expat bubble. Now, gratuitous cross-promotion. We do that a lot on CoffeeChillTV. In the back catalogue, you will find another walk and talk video, this one at Non-Project Public Park, Udon Thani, where I unpack the concept of escaping the expat bubble. And guys, if you're full-time expat, you might get stuck in that echo chamber around whingy, whiny, miserable people. And, you know, that's one of the downsides, potential, of being a full-time expat. You can get kind of stuck in a zone. If you're part-time, you physically have a change of location. And I think that can affect your mindset, your outlook, and your perspectives. A change is as good as a holiday. And so folks, before I get on my walking shoes and head over to the Mooloolah Wharf, the Mooloolah Spit, just to make sure this is not just Australian centric, this video, I want to talk to you about another example. A few years ago, I had a friend in Udontani from a country in Scandinavia. I won't give away too many details on this guy, but he told me that the country he's from, he is rewarded if he spends 6 months of the year in his home country. That his age pension, his social security is higher if he spends half the year in his homeland in Scandinavia. And you know what? In Australia too, there are land tax issues, tax residency, tax-free thresholds. And yes, in Australia, I'd argue Australia is pretty hardcore when it comes to the age pension and your location. You know, a lot of Aussies have to go and serve time 2 years in the run-up to their first age pension payment. They've got to go home for 2 years. So, you know, going back home, yeah, it can break the cycle, can get you out of the expat bubble, but, you know, money talks. Money changes everything. And if you're going to get a higher level of social security and pay less tax by spending 6 months of the year in your homeland, well, that's a factor to consider, isn't it? It's not the only factor. Money isn't everything, but, you know, hey, money talks. Consider that one too. And look, some final thoughts on money. Yeah, you know, tax and social security are one issue, but, you know, preserving your assets. You may have decided to keep a house in your homeland and go full-time as an expat. You may have decided to do that. And, you know, for me, I'd been away for 4 years, and then I went back and inspected both of my properties. Now, touch wood, by and large, they're in pretty good shape. But there were a few little things. And, you know, it doesn't matter how many property manager reports you get, nothing beats, in my opinion as a landlord, an in-person inspection of your own property, you know. Also for me, when I'm in Thailand, I don't drive. I don't currently have a driver's license for Thailand. When I came back to Australia after that 4-year break, the joy of driving, you know, it was great. So, you know, if you are a full-time expat and you're still holding assets in your homeland, who's looking after them? You know, who's looking after them? Have you got someone you trust checking in on properties, motor vehicles? What about your investments? I mean, online you can keep a track of things, you know, but still, you know, who's minding the fort while you're away? If you're a part-time expat, then that's not really an issue. Not so much, because, you know, every 6 months or every 3 months, every 9 months, whatever it is, you go home and, you know, you can check out what's happening on the home front. At the same time, guys, you can reconnect with family and friends. You know, yes, technology's good, but, you know, a video call is no substitute for a face-to-face meeting, in my experience. And of course, when you go back home, you can reconnect with the local flora and fauna, and you know, the much maligned bin chicken, the ibis, has featured in several of my video logs on this trip back home, on this little 6-month jaunt. And you know what, I like the Aussie wildlife. You know, I like my ibises, my magpies, my kookaburras, my brush turkeys, my cockatoos, galahs and rosellas. You know, first and foremost, I'm an Aussie, and you know, coming back to Australia, every time I come back, I love it. So we plonked ourselves under the gazebo. Hancock Street, yeah, Maroochydore, Bruce Highway. That takes you to the Esplanade. Mooloolah. Over here, guys, the Mooloolah Surf Club. And as we pivot around, here it is, the Wharf. And, you know, the big aquarium is here. Heaps of bars and restaurants. You keep going down there. There's a big seafood market, casual shopping, and hey, look at those boats. Some of those would be seriously expensive. Yeah, this is not a place for pretenders, financially speaking. Yeah, some beauties there, guys. And this is a nice little spot, guys. You know, I love the beach, but you know, the canals and parklands, the inlets, the outlets, the estuaries on the Sunshine Coast, they're pretty cool as well, in my opinion. So folks, getting back on topic, in terms of expat life, full-time expat living. You know, what's good about that? Well, I did it for 4 years. 4 years straight, you know, and for 4 years straight, no long haul flights. You know, I could stay put. I could set up camp. I could get settled. My life was simplified. No complex logistics that go with being a part-time expat. More certainty, deeper immersion in the local Thai culture. And, you know, I think more meaningful relationships in terms of the expat cohorts. So, you know, there's a lot of pros in going full-time. You know, first and foremost, things are just simpler. You know, you're not in and out of airports, for one thing. In and out of immigration, that's a whole other kettle of fish too, isn't it? You know, every time I go through immigration, no matter how much I've travelled, and I've travelled extensively, you know, there's still that little bit of nervousness. You know, it's not until you get through immigration and you're sitting in a departure lounge, I can fully relax. I don't know about you guys, but you know, for 4 years, I didn't have to worry about that. I didn't have to. I was just 4 years, you know, sitting there in Udon Thani. I wasn't just sitting there. I worked full time for 2 years, but yeah, I didn't have to worry about any of those logistical challenges, and you know, the uncertainties of going in and out of immigration gates. That's certainly a huge benefit in being a full-time expat. Of course, during those 4 years, I wasn't going in and out of any, you know, airport immigration checks and, you know, boarding, getting on and off planes and all that sort of stuff. I didn't have to worry about jet lag for those 4 years. But during those 4 years, I still had to go to immigration every 90 days and report. I still, once a year, had to renew my long-term visa arrangements. And whether you're on a work visa, a marriage visa, a volunteer visa, an education visa, a retirement visa, or one of these new funky, digital nomad type visas, business visas, whatever it is, in most countries where you are living as an expat, you need to renew. And renewing every year in Thailand, it's a great reality check. It is for me. It just reminds me that I'm only a guest in the Kingdom of Thailand, and Australia's my home. I think there are too many expats who have been living full time, some of them for like 10 years straight, and it's like, Thailand is my home. It's like, I don't know if the law considers that to be the case. Okay, and I don't care. If you bought a house, a business, or whatever, you're subject to an annual renewal. Sunday morning here at the Wharf, Mooloolah. It's just beautiful and peaceful and tranquil, but just as the sun goes down, guys, at twilight, this is a truly magnificent spot to be. Whether you stay here, at the Wharf, some awesome bars and restaurants here, or maybe you go out on a bit of a booze cruise, the old sunset cruise. I'm a bit of a fan, and we went past the aquarium. That's a bona fide leading tourist attraction on the Sunshine Coast. But if you're in Mooloolah for a few days, come down here as the sun sets, and have a few sherbets and din-dins. That's my recommendation for you to consider. And as we come back to the expat life discussions, I suppose it would be remiss of me not to talk about another kind of scenario. And this is one where you are a full-time expat, but you sort of commit to going home, every 2 years. Maybe go home for 6 to 8 weeks every 2 years, or you go home once a year for a month or a couple of weeks, whatever it is. You are a full-time expat, and your homeland, it becomes the holiday destination. So, you might live in Cambodia, and every 2 years you go back home to Canada for a month or so. And that leads me to a discussion I had with a Canadian expat in Udon Thani, Thailand. So I was talking to this fine gentleman at the full throttle on Udon Thani's famous soy sampan, and he'd just come back from Canada. And, you know, I suppose a bit like me, you know, I had to go back to Australia after 4 years straight due to some family issues. He'd gone back to Canada for, I think, 5 or 6 weeks. And he said to me, you know, I know some guys who would be well served in going back home for even just a month, you know. And beyond the expat bubble, guys, there's an issue when you're living overseas where, particularly in a place like Thailand, which has many more freedoms than the nanny state. I love Australia, but we've become a bit of a nanny state than, say, Australia. So there's less accountability, I suppose, and, you know, it can become a little bit hedonistic. And not that I mind a little bit of hedonism and debauchery, but, you know, the point he was making is you get a bit of perspective if you come home every couple of years. So there was the Wharf, guys. I tell you what, there's one of the restaurants in there, didn't catch the name, but they were doing a roaring trade, and the breakfasts, they smelt delish. But we're leaving the Wharf, we're heading towards the Spit. A few more talking points on that part-time versus full-time expat life continuum. And then we're going to wrap up this vlog. Please stay with me as we come down the home straight. So folks, do you remember the TV show Robin Leach, Lifestyles and the Rich and the Famous? Oh, it was a song by Good Charlotte as well. Interestingly, Good Charlotte, those guys became the very thing they criticised in that song, but I digress. Lifestyles and the Rich and the Famous. Well, here it is, folks. Millionaires Row, Billionaires Row. You know, how much would that boat cost? You know, cost more than a lot of houses in certain parts of the country. And look at those mansions. Look at that. What a spot to be. You know, yeah, this is it's a tightly held pocket of real estate on the Sunshine Coast. Looks like there's some construction going over there, and yeah, no risk of overcapitalising, I assume, because this is seriously deluxe real estate in this area. As you spin back around here in the park, you know, you got hotels here, and not all of them are super expensive either. You know, sometimes staying in a place like this, back from the Esplanade, but you're still, you know, a very short walk to the Esplanade of Mooloolah, you know, and you had a nice little aspect over the water, haven't you? So yeah, there are hotels and permanent apartments here as well. So talking about lifestyles and getting back to that expat lifestyle, just a few final points as we run down towards the finish line. And you know, I suppose there would be that sporting analogy, you know, hedging your bets. You want to bet on, you know, horse 7, race 9. You want to invest $20. You put $20 on the win, or you put $10 each way, and if it wins, you win most money. If you go all in, if it wins, you still win on the each way bet. But if your horse only runs a place, only the each way bet will return you a dividend. So, you know, contingency planning can be, you know, can be important. As you watch this boat make its way along the harbour. And when it comes to full-time expat life, there's kind of a sunk cost, both financial and personal. You know, the financial might be you sold your house in the US of A and you've gone all in on Team Cambodia. And that house you sold in the USA, if you'd held it, it would have continued to appreciate in value. And what have you got in Thailand? Maybe you bought an overpriced condominium. Maybe you bought smart. Maybe you're renting, and is rent money dead money? That's a whole other discussion. But, you know, there's kind of a financial sunk cost when you go all in and sell up everything. There's also an emotional sunk cost. So, you know, I watched a video recently, and I don't know if the story was true or not, but spoke about a guy who'd spent 5 years in Da Nang, Vietnam. He'd left somewhere in Europe and sold up everything, went to Da Nang. First few years were just magnificent, glory days. But he ended up leaving with his tail between his legs and, you know, broke as, and he ended up couch surfing at his sister's house. And according to the story, this gentleman wished he'd kept his property back in Europe, you know, that he was, you know, kind of embarrassed. You know, I saw another story where a guy basically moved back in with his daughter, you know, couch surfing because he'd kind of blown it all. Another one with a similar story, the guy said, yeah, but I don't regret it. They were the best 5 years of my life. So, you know, look, there's no judging, folks. It's just kind of an awareness. Do you have a plan B? Have you got a bit of a contingency? Is there a sweet spot? Because I think for many of us who live as expats, whether we're full-time or part-time, there is a sweet spot that we can find to sort of, you know, make sure it all adds up for us emotionally and financially. And folks, you know, there's another downside. You know, so I'm not just bagging the full-time expat life. I'm also talking about when you're a part-time expat, you know, you get a different sort of reality check. The full-time reality check I got when I was a full-time expat in Thailand was the annual visa. The annual visa renewal just reminded me that I was a guest in the country. Well, when I came back to Australia after a 4-year hiatus, I got hit with the reality check that I was a ghost in my hometown. Now, I've dedicated an entire video called Retirement and the Ghost in the Machine. Talks about that phenomenon, and you know, you can find that in the back catalogue of CoffeeChillTV. But sometimes ignorance is bliss. You're in you know, Malaysia, you've been living in Kuala Lumpur several years, the local coffee shop lady knows you. She knows exactly how you like your coffee in the morning, and you're a bit of a big deal and you feel, you know, kind of special. If you go back home to your little house in suburbia and you're sort of a ghost, you're invisible. By being a full-time expat, ignorance is bliss. You can live in the fantasy that you're a bigger deal than what you actually are, because when you come home, if you're a part-time expat, one of the downsides, as I've found anyway, is the reverse reality check. Oh, people have moved on. I feel like an alien in my own country. That happens too a little bit. It didn't happen to me, but it does happen to some folks. So folks, everyone's different. There's no right or wrong. There's a sweet spot for all of us, and I would love you to opine. What's been your experience? You know, have you been up and down that continuum, or did you just go in lock, stock and barrel, one-way ticket, sold up everything and bang, and you've been there happily for the last 5 or 10 years full time, and you have no consideration even going back for a month? Nope, you're very happy where you are. Great, tell us about it. Are you a part-time expat? You know, do you like to go back home once a year? You know, do you want to go back home, or is there a financial, health, some other imperative that sort of forces you to go back home once a year? But, you know, if you're a part-time expat, you know, what's good about that? Or what are the challenges? I'd love to hear from you folks. And finally, whether you do or do not choose to opine, or like, or share, or subscribe, I'm just happy that you made it to the end of the video, folks. Cheers for watching, and hey, let's see you again soon on the original Coffee Chill channel, Coffee Chill TV. All the best.